Well, as you know, the race for November's American presidential election is culminating in a major event, a key event, in fact, the start of the Democratic Convention, where Kamala Harris will be formally nominated as the party's candidate for president. That event is taking place in the Midwestern city of Chicago, and that is where Arise international correspondent Faith Orr is at the moment, and we can cross live and speak to her. Good to see you, Faith. Obviously, the highlight of the week is the formal nomination as the presidential candidate of the Democratic Party, Kamala Harris. Just how important will it be for Miss Harris?
Oh, extremely important. We know that she has already been officially nominated. That happened on August the 6th, but that was a virtual roll call. Whereas on Tuesday night, there is going to be that ceremonial roll call, which will take place here. And it's a rallying cry for the Democratic Party to get behind Kamala Harris before she gives her official acceptance speech on Thursday night to close out the convention. Tonight, we have President Joe Biden, who is already in town. He will be handing over the baton to Harris when he speaks, when he opens the convention, the main part of the programming this evening. Thousands of people, 50,000 people have already gathered here in Chicago for this event. Lots of them behind me, as you can see, so we expect things in just a few hours here to really get underway when President Biden takes to the stage.
And of course, as you hinted there, Faith, these events, of course, very tightly choreographed. So lots to look forward to. We can talk about all that in a minute. But protests also expected over the Democrats' position on Gaza and Palestinian rights. I mean, what is your sense of how big that could be? And we're looking at live pictures of some of the protesters now.
Absolutely. You're probably looking at the live pictures that are happening just behind me. We were much closer in. Unfortunately, the network is being blocked around a lot of these events. But I spoke to some of the organisers of this event. This is in Union Square, just a couple of blocks away from the United Centre, which is the main convention centre. And they say they expect anywhere from 10 to 20,000 people to show up today. Now, there is the main stage behind me, but then there will also be a march, a protest march. The route is about a mile long. It kind of loops around in a circle around United Centre, and then everyone will return here. People have very, very strong feelings here. A lot of people comparing it to what happened in 1968 when the Democratic Convention was, of course, taken over by protests against the Vietnam War. Very, very strong sense of feeling here. But I don't know if it quite compares to that, because there people are saying, you know, I had a taxi driver take me in from the airport yesterday, and he was telling me he was at that protest and he said it felt like we were fighting for our lives. Whereas this time it feels like people are fighting for the lives of Palestinians. I should say as well, Ivica and I, our man behind the camera, on our way here, we did pass a pro-Israel protest, but that had about 20 people at it compared to the thousands that you see behind me. And I should say as well, hundreds and hundreds of police officers all around the perimeter of this square that we're in.
And beyond the protests and Kamala Harris and, of course, President Biden, who will be speaking later today, what else can we expect from that Democratic Convention, which we understand will be widely televised across the main networks in America?
Absolutely. So as you mentioned, Biden speaking today, we don't just expect him to give Harris a boost. We also expect him to speak about what has been achieved by the administration in the past 4 years. We're also going to hear from Hillary Clinton today. Of course, she lost to Donald Trump, so she knows what that feels like. And we're also going to hear from Jill Biden, the First Lady. Tomorrow, Barack Obama will be the main speaker. Then on Wednesday, we're going to hear from former President Bill Clinton. He will take to the stage just before Tim Walz introduces himself, of course, as the pick for Vice President. And then, as I mentioned, Kamala Harris herself will close out the event on Thursday, as is tradition, that the nominee will take to the stage, accept the Democratic nomination to be the next President of the United States.
And beyond the activities taking place in that sort of Democratic convention, the two rivals, Kamala Harris and Donald Trump, have of course been spending millions on campaign adverts, crisscrossing the US, attending rallies and meetings to try to get their message across. I mean, what's your assessment of how that's been going so far?
I have to say, I've seen a few signs today. Kamala Harris chose an interesting word to describe Donald Trump. She called him weird. And that seems to have stuck because I have seen so many signs saying Trump and JD Vance are weird. And it seems like quite a gentle insult, shall we say, but it's the sort of insult that I think will annoy Trump. It will get to him. And there are so many signs saying that. So I think the messaging is quite simple and quite effective because, of course, that is what Trump relies on. He relies on these little catchphrases and these words sticking. Beyond that, we are hearing lots of conversations around the economy, around the state of food prices, around inflation, that they can improve things. We should note that that isn't just an American problem, that's a global problem. It's a very, very similar conversation actually to one that's being had in Nigeria with the increasing food prices. You know, I've been speaking to people here who say that they are now spending hundreds of dollars more than they would have on food shopping. So it's a huge problem for people here, especially people with families, and that is some of the key issues that Harris is trying to address. That seems to be being received quite well here, but of course we'll have to wait and see to the reception once the main programming starts in just a few hours.
Indeed, and both Ms. Harris and Mr. Trump are campaigning in Pennsylvania at the weekend. I mean, in those crucial swing states like Pennsylvania, what are the opinion polls saying about who is likely to come out on top? I mean, who's got the momentum? Because everything seems to be moving in the direction of Ms. Harris.
You did cut out for a little bit there, Charles, but I think I understand what you're asking. And I think what's happening in these swing states is something that Trump didn't want to see happen. He wanted Biden to stay as the Democratic nominee because he was comfortably leading Biden in these swing states. But Harris has reinvigorated, she has rejuvenated the campaign. She has brought an energy back to the Democratic campaign, and she has regalvanized these voters, particularly, as you mentioned, in these key swing states where she is now leading in at least 3 of them, whereas previously Trump had a comfortable lead. So he is now describing what's happened to Biden as a coup to try and distract from the fact that Kamala Harris is polling in much better numbers than he is. So that's an interesting turn of events. Trump will no doubt try to remain the centre of attention this week despite the Democratic National Convention taking place. We'll yet to see what he does, but as you said there, Harris and Waltz had been doing a tour of the country on their way here. They did arrive in Chicago last night for this key event.
Faith, we'd better let you go before the line finally gives up on us, but thank you very much indeed. So far it held, and we heard everything that you said, and we'll obviously be returning to Faith over the next few days in Chicago there and the venue of that Democratic convention. Faith Orr is Arise international correspondent, and she was talking to me on the line from Chicago.